Okay, this is chapter 14, Dr. Dorian. Now you remember, Charlotte's singing put Wilbur to sleep in our last chapter. But a couple of chapters before that, the mother was really concerned about Fern. And she says, I don't have to talk to Dr. Dorian about this. Well, so the next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped that Fern would go out and play with the other children instead of heading for the Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch the animals. Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard, said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. Fern, said her mother sternly, you must not invent things. You know that spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk. Well, Charlotte can. She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks. What kind of a story does she tell? Asked Mrs. Arable. Well, she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating? Fern, dear, how would a fish get in a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arable. You know it couldn't happen. You're making this up. Oh, it happened all right, replied Fern. Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers, she built a web across a stream, and then one day she was hanging around in the web, and a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web, and the fish was caught by one fin. Mother, its tail was wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Well, Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in and dodging out, and she was beaten mercilessly over the head by the wildly thrashing fish, dancing in and out and throwing. Burn! Snapped her mother. You stop it! Stop inventing these wild tales. I'm not inventing, I'm just telling you the facts. Okay, what finally happened? Asked her mother, whose curiosity began to get the better of her. Well, Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up and then she ate him when she got good and ready. You know, spiders have to eat just the same as the rest of us. I suppose they do, she said. Charlotte has another cousin who's a balloonist. She stands on her head and she lets out a lot of line and is carried aloft in the wind. Mother, you would simply love to do that, wouldn't you? Yes, I would, come to think of it, replied Mrs. Arable. But Fern, darling, I wish you would go and play outdoors instead of just going up to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much. Alone, said Fern. Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It is a very sociable place. Not at all lonely. Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road towards Zuckerman's. Her mother dusted the sitting room as she worked, and she kept thinking about Fern. It didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals like this. And so finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind that she would pay a call on Dr. Dorian, and she would ask his advice. She got in the car, and she drove to his office in the village. Now, Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was very glad to see Mrs. Arable, and he gave her a comfortable chair. Those are three very strange things to put all in the same sentence. He had a thick beard, he was glad to see her, and he gave her a comfortable chair. I just love that. It's about Fern, as she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen and just watches the animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens. How enchanting, he said. It must be real nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, hasn't he? Well, yeah, said Mrs. Arable, but it all started with that pig that we let Fern raise on a bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and then ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. I've been hearing things about that pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. They say he's quite a pig. Well, have you heard about the words that appeared in the spider's web? Asked Mrs. Arable nervously. Yes, replied the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Asked Mrs. Arable. Understand what? Well, do you understand how there could be any writing in a spider's web? Well, no, said Dr. Dorian. I don't understand it, but for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle. Now, what is miraculous about a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arable. I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web. I need for you to see. This is her. She's sitting, notice how she has her hands on her purse. She looks a little nervous, right? And then here's Dr. Dorian. He's not nervous at all. He's like leaning back in his chair. It's not how I pictured him, by the way. But there's that beard. So I guess, yes. I don't see why you say that a web is a miracle. It's just a web. Well, did you ever try to spin one? Said Dr. Dorian. She shifted uneasily in her chair. No, she replied, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit a sock. Well, sure, said the doctor, but somebody taught you, didn't they? My mother taught me. Well, who taught the spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? Well, I suppose so, said Mrs. Arable. I never looked at it that way before. But still, I don't understand how those words got into the web. I don't understand it. I don't like what I can't understand. No, none of us do, said Dr. Dorian. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, but I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arable fidgeted. Well, Fern says that the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe that animals can talk? Well, I've never heard one say anything, he replied, but that proves nothing. I mean, it's quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and that I didn't catch a remark because I wasn't, paying attention. Well, children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says that the animals in Zuckerman's barn talks, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talk less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Okay, well, I feel better about Fern, said Mrs. Arable. You don't think that I need to worry about her? Oh, does she look well? Asked the doctor. Well, yes. Appetite good? Yes, she's always hungry. And sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Well, then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think that she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think that she will always love animals, but I doubt that she spends her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. I mean, how about boys? Does she know any boys? Well, she knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable brightly. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and went into a deep thought. Henry Fussy, he mumbled. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate her friends in the barn or with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say offhand that spiders and pigs were fully as interesting as, well, Henry Fussy. Yet I predict that the day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children can change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked, opening his eyes widely. Oh, Avery? She said, I have to fix this. My thing is coming. There we go. Avery? Oh, Avery is always fine, of course. He gets into poison ivy, and then he gets stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything that he lays his hand on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. And I want you guys to know that Flo, my darling here, has been lying here this whole time, just sleeping. Like a precious little angel, as Mrs. Doubtfire would say, precious little angel. Yeah, so what we know now is that the adults in this world do not see that as normal behavior for a child to be talking to animals. But you know what? What do we know? We only use like 1/3 or 2/3 of our brain. There's a whole mess of brain in there that we're not using. Who knows? If maybe the animals can talk and we don't know. Okay. That's it for today. Talk to you guys soon. Mwah.